Hello, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you're watching this edition of Cross's Corner. I'm Martin Cross, and with me I have got the amazing Caragh McMurtry. I say amazing because you've got an absolutely incredible story, Caragh. It's brilliant to have you on Cross's Corner.
Thank you so much. It's been a long time since I've been contemplating.
Oh, well, I think, by the time we kind of finish this chat, it will be apparent to people exactly why you are an amazing person in terms of the things you do. So, we were chatting just earlier. So, just let us know how your day to day's gone as a nice little segue into our chat.
Yeah, so I was just saying that should I show it?
Yeah, please.
I can't pull the camera all the way out. I can sort of like twist it round, but I've got my pinboard that I sorted out this morning. For me, it's like a very vital bit of admin because I've got the job that pays the bills, and then I've got Neurodiverse sport, which is like a second job and my passion, and I also feel like I'm doing 7 people's jobs at once. And I'm a very visual thinker, and I can be quite I don't want to say scatterbrained. I just have a lot of ideas all the time, and it feels like they're floating around my head. And if I don't get them out and put them somewhere, they just float away. So like getting them out on the board and putting them out and moving them around, it almost feels like I can close the tabs in my head, and it really clears my brain, and it makes me feel a lot less stressed, and I can make sense of things. So yeah, it's really nice. Like it's nice that I can do that, and it's also quite cool, like learning about myself all the time at the moment.
Wow. So it will be really interesting, I think, just for people who watch to understand some of the terms that we're going to use in this in this chat. So neurodiversity, first of all, let's maybe start with that.
Yeah, so I mean, the way that I understand it is we are all neurodiverse. So neurodiversity just explains the varying neurology and behavior traits of everybody. And then neurodivergent is people who sit just a bit further from, I'd say, the norm, or more like the average. Like nobody is the same as anybody else, but sometimes you can group people and characteristics very generally together, or you find sort of the middle ground between different extremes. And neurodivergent people maybe sit at some kind of extreme, and they might have a label of a condition, say like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and it just means that they're maybe a bit more nuanced in the way that they think, learn, and therefore the way they behave. So yeah.
Now, you've founded this company, Neurodiverse Sport, and for anyone watching, if you look up Caragh McMurtry or just look up Neurodiverse Sport, you'll go straight to this great website that you've got. Why or what induced you to start that, Caragh?
So I guess my experience of sport. So I was drawn to sport in retrospect because of probably my neurodivergence. So I got a very late diagnosis of autism. Technically my diagnosis is high functioning autism. It would have been Asperger's, but people don't like to use the functioning terms anymore. So yeah, just a heads up for anyone who's listening. I mean, I would never judge anyone for what they said if they were trying to educate themselves. So it doesn't really bother me, but some people are bothered by it, I guess, because they might have some kind of like trauma attached to it or something. But yeah, I was driven to sport because I had certain characteristics, and I think a lot of neurodivergent people are. And I actually think that rowing, from the research that I've done, is one of those sports that does attract people who are a certain way.
Really? Oh, that's
Yeah,
interesting, because
honestly.
I see myself as an obsessive. So, in one sense, so what characteristics have you found in your research?
So I would say, like you said, like obsessive, attention to detail, like quite factual, analytical, um, potentially black and white, maybe. I don't want to say lacking social skills, but like there's a reason why certain people are drawn to, say, ball sports, and sports where it's like a lot of interaction. And rowing, it does demand some interaction, but ultimately you are still on your own within a team. So there's that very interesting element that I think makes it more of a encouraging environment for people who maybe struggle with the social interaction side of things.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think there might be a pattern there.
So, this was part of my question about why you founded Neurodiverse Sport.
Yeah, sorry. Back to the original question. Yeah, so I was drawn to sport because of I had these characteristics, and it was a way for me to speak without having to use languages, speaking through my actions and not my words.
Oh, right.
And I was good at it, and it made me feel special, and it was a great way to manage my emotions, and it was a great outlet, and a positive obsession, I guess. And that got me quite far. I got to the Junior World Championships and won a silver medal. The under-23s won a silver medal, and that was off the back of starting rowing through an outreach project, and kind of really driving myself there. I had a lot of autonomy over my training, and really thrived on that. I didn't realize it at the time. And then when I joined the senior team, it was very much you had to fit within some very narrow goalposts, I guess.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And like everyone has to stretch to a degree, but I felt like I was stretching in every single way. I was like reinventing the wheel rather than tweaking things just to fit into this mold. And it took a lot out of me. It took a lot of my energy, outside of the energy I was putting into performing. I was putting energy into coming across a certain way, and how I was talking, how I was thinking, how I was behaving. I couldn't do the things that I needed to do to understand and to thrive. And ultimately that led to me like burning out quite a lot. So I would like burn out and regroup, and burn out and regroup.
Yeah.
And
physically and emotionally.
Yeah, both. And I was
Yeah.
always getting ill, and I was always just like almost, you know, the Duracell bunny advert, but the other one.
Yeah.
Where it just grinds to a halt. That would be me.
Okay.
And so then a doctor basically saw that pattern and theorized that I might have bipolar disorder, and advised me to start taking medication for that. And yeah, that was the start of a very bad time.
When was that in your career? Was that back in 2014 or before then?
Yeah, so it's about 2014.
Yeah. Okay.
And so just before that, I'd been to under-23s and medalled. I'd gone onto the senior squad, been in some of the boats that were medaling at like World Cups and stuff. I'd raced at the World Championships a couple of times. I'd stroked the 8.
In 2013, was that right?
2014, I stroked the 8.
2014, you stroked. 2014 in Amsterdam.
Yeah. And then I was put on medication, and it had a huge impact on me. So, and I didn't really realize, I guess when you're feeling quite burnt out anyway, it's hard to tell that something's making you feel worse.
Yes.
And also as an athlete, I think a lot of us tend to sort of internalize our issues and think, oh, I need to find a solution to this. It's my fault. I need to find a solution, rather than speaking up and looking elsewhere and saying, I don't think this is right for me. And I think I've always had a problem with self-advocacy, and
describe what you mean by that.
So yeah, this is something that I really, really want to push with neurodiverse sport eventually.
Yeah.
Is giving athletes who are neurodivergent or marginalized in some way the confidence and the skills and ability to self-advocate. So that's like being able to recognize your vulnerabilities and basically stand up for yourself, to know if you're being like ill-advised or gaslit. And it might be that people aren't meaning to do it. Often it is that people don't mean to, but they just don't have the knowledge and understanding.
Yeah.
Like I actually don't blame the first doctor or the second doctor that looked at me or the psychiatrist that looked at me after that for the fact that I had a misdiagnosis, because they only knew what they knew at the time and they were only trying to help. Like, I don't doubt that I don't think that they would ever maliciously put me on this medication and give me a diagnosis that was wrong. So yeah.
So you had two doctors and a psychiatrist all come out and say they thought that this was an issue that you had.
So it would be this is what's quite bad, is a doctor could say you have this, and then you'll see another doctor and they'll be like, okay, they said that's like, they said you, then no one questions it. So then it snowballs from there, and it's like, oh, you have this label and you're feeling bad. How about we up your medication? Oh, you have this label and you're feeling bad and you've got these 2 sets of medication. Why don't we add this as well? So that's what it would be. It would be people just assuming that the very first diagnosis was correct. Like nobody questions anyone else's findings.
It's very warm-hearted of you not to blame or not to seek to blame those medical professionals.
Yeah. I think that if you, don't get me wrong, I've had a lot of therapy. And we'll get to that, but like genuinely, if you harbor like a lot of anger, it only eats away at you.
Okay.
And nobody, I don't want to say nobody listens to people who are bitter, but like whenever I hear someone who's got like a bee in their bonnet, I'm like, I think that you should sort of work on your own problems, and then you can be clear-headed, and then we can move forwards. Like, and yeah, I think it's important for me to not let anything cloud what I'm doing, not let anything personal cloud what I'm doing. So it was really important for my own health and also what I'm doing to just see that in a neutral light. But I need to get back to the question originally.
Well, what I'm going to suggest, Caragh, is we kind of come back to the question at some stage, but in the sense of diving into to 2014, because obviously you were stroking the women's 8 that was in the final of the 2014 World Championships. And maybe your target was a medal, but really good to be in the final and so on. And then you weren't in the team in 2015, and you weren't in the Olympic team in 2016. What was happening to you in those intervening years?
This is something I don't know if I should talk about.
Okay.
So how do I don't know if I could talk about this without name. Maybe I can talk about it in a really general way.
Yeah.
So I was stroking the age. I think I was like 21 or something. I was really young.
Yeah.
And maybe slightly older than that. And I had a lot of like very experienced athletes in the boat with me. And for some reason we had like, I was bow side, we had a tandem of 2 stroke siders behind me.
Yeah.
In 6 and 7. Very strange. But that was at the World Championships. So just before that, I'd stroked the 8 at Henley Royal, and we won against the Australians in the finals. So the Australian
That must have been amazing.
Yeah, it was really good. It was a really good race. So we were good. How much of this can I say? At the World Championships, I was really upset with how some of the crew spoke to the crew as a whole.
Yes.
Like, I was really, really furious.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of let it be known. And I feel like I got used as a scapegoat. So I kind of questioned the hierarchy. And that's part of my neurodiversity, my neurodivergence, is that I don't see hierarchy. Like, I can meet someone really famous and I just like, I can't talk to them like they're famous. I can't defer to them. I just can't do it. Like, I don't see it. And I think I questioned the hierarchy. I got really angry at something that other people were like, well, it's okay because they're seen as up here, so that's acceptable behavior. I was like, that's not acceptable. I'm acting furious. And the race wasn't good, and it could have been that I was not in the right headspace because I was still enraged because it was literally the night before that happened.
Oh,
but
wow.
I'm sure it was also the fact that the rest of the crew were like, you know, some of them were a bit shell shocked that they'd got, you know, lambasted by a couple of the crew, and there's a couple of the crew that obviously thought that they were much better than everyone else. It was just a bit of a mess. And then lo and behold, the race didn't go well. But then the wash up was like, it felt really insidious, and like it wasn't clear cut, and it wasn't like, I much prefer it if something's happened, if someone just says it to me how it is. Like, be explicit. I can't read between the lines. It actually stresses me out if I can sort of tell there's something going on, something's being said, and I don't know what's been said. And there was a lot of that. And to me, it felt like I'd been chucked under the bus. And I was then given like a pairs partner that was like not even in so ranked quite low.
Yes.
But what was said to me was like, no, nothing's going on. No, it's fine. No, nothing's going on. And I just wish someone had said like, actually, we've decided that was you. Like, your reaction, you need to learn to like, this is the way we do it. We have a hierarchy, you know. Athletes, if you prove yourself to be the fastest in the boat, that you can talk to people however you want, whatever. Like, just, if that's how you're going to do it, fine, say it. Tell me that I've done something wrong. Tell me I need to get back in line. Don't just kind of like do it behind my back. And I think that was what really sent me over the edge. And that was what like sent me into that, like, that burnout that then was, I've never actually said that before.
Oh, well done.
That's a very, that's, to me, if there was one time that I could say could have changed everything, it would have been that. The way that was dealt with. I think everything that came after that, I had already experienced some really terrible things, and I was already like scarred, and I don't want to say damaged goods, but I was damaged goods. Like, I do think that athletes need to go through difficulties to get stronger, but there's definitely a limit where if you've been through too much, you're never you'll never be that person that you were. Like blissful ignorance is actually, I think, a good thing to a degree.
So how
That
did
sounds
you
bad, but
how did you emerge from that then, Caragh?
I didn't. No, I didn't. So
But you were back in the team in 2017 in the 4.
yeah, I didn't. It took a while. So the first few years on lithium was like a massive body shock. I put on like 8 kilos.
Oh,
Like when
wow.
I spoke to the
That's
psychiatrist,
a mood stabilizer. It's meant to be a mood stabilizer, lithium, isn't it?
it's what like Evanescence and Nirvana sing about, and like it's what people in psychiatric wards will be put on.
Yeah.
And because I was an athlete and I was so healthy and had a good set of kidneys, I ended up taking a lot. So because you can get lithium toxicity if you take too
Yes.
much, it can be really dangerous. You have to get regular blood tests, and every time I'd get a blood test, they'd be like, I actually genuinely felt sometimes like an experiment. Like some of the psychiatrists would look at me and be like, "You're taking that much, and like this is your bloods." So every time it would come back as a bit lower than they expect, they would say, "Oh, just take some more and take some more." And I was on 1,400 milligrams by the end, and I was on lamotrigine, which is another mood stabilizer, and I was on quetiapine, which is an antipsychotic.
Bloody hell.
So the worst one was probably the quetiapine.
Yeah.
So the quetiapine, if I took it, I would almost be knocked out. Like, when you're just slurring and you just can't, it would be like that. So I was advised to take that before bed. But then even in the morning, if I would try and drive to training, I'd literally nearly drive into a bush. I swear, it's like you shouldn't operate heavy machinery, kind of.
Yes.
And that's really bad. But yeah, so that kind of put me out. So when I started to take that, and halfway through, so actually it would have been the start of 2015.
Yes.
I just completely had to withdraw from everything because I was just incapable. And it took a couple of years to even feel like I could be human again. And it's weird. I think by the end, basically, I had you talk about the 1%ers.
Yeah.
I had every single 1%er nailed, but that was just to do the bare minimum, to do the bare minimum performances. That's how my body must have just slowly got used to being on lithium and feeling a certain way. And I sort of slowly found ways to get around it. And it was really bad. It was almost like my own problem solving skills and my own determination was to my detriment, because actually ideally it would have been that I just couldn't go on, and somebody was like, within a year was like, what are you doing on all this stuff? But instead I found ways. I always find ways, and I think it's a very common neurodivergent thing, because you're forced to your whole life, you're forced to find ways to get around your different thinking and learning and behaving. And I found a way to make it work, and that meant that it went under the radar for another 3 years after that. So in 2017, 2018 and 2019, I was still taking all this medication.
Really? Mm. And you got in the team?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is, but at the time the narrative was, Caragh, you're not performing. Caragh, you're not Caragh, you've got a personality problem. Caragh, you're a bully. Caragh, you're basically a waste of space.
That must have been. Was that from your fellow athletes or coaches?
If it was ever from athletes, it was more, mainly from coaches. If it was ever from athletes, it was more that when coaches create a hierarchical system, it forces the athletes to sort of mimic the coach's attitude. if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, you know, to stay on top, you mimic what the coach's attitude is, and, you know, you have to kind of like look down on those below, because that's how you stay at the top, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that any athletes were particularly malicious. They just weren't, some of them weren't necessarily supportive. And I mean, I have heard, I try not to like ask. Sometimes I ask, in the last year or so, I've asked people like, what did you actually think of me?
Oh, really?
And what did people say about me? And some of the answers that I heard, it took a lot out of me to hear it. So
oh, wow. That's
it's
really interesting.
Yeah, but it would be like the coaches, or one coach in particular, and I know this from a physiologist that was there, and also another coach would say things like, "Oh, Cara's on a mad one again." This is when they thought I had bipolar.
Yeah.
So if I was struggling, rather than being like, "Why is Caragh struggling?" Like, we really, something's like, we haven't hit the nail on the head here, because there's someone who's in the building still putting performances out enough to be in the building, but sometimes can't really turn up. What's going on? Instead, it was like, oh, Cara's on a mad one again.
Yeah.
Like, that genuinely was the narrative. And then when I asked somebody else, you know, what did people say about me? That was someone's like, yeah, they'd just be like, oh, Cara's on a mad one again.
Yeah.
So that's the example of the coach will say it, and then the athletes like say it as well. And then what it does is it serves to shut down any question. So like I said, when I said none of the doctors or psychiatrists questioned the original diagnosis, none of the athletes or coaches questioned what was actually going on with me, because of these things that were just chucked out of people's mouths.
So this may seem a stupid question. What was it that meant it was difficult or impossible for you to question the diagnosis?
Because I don't know why. So I feel really, and I'm going to use functioning here, because it's easier for me to explain this. I feel really high functioning in some ways, but part of what autism is that you have a very spiky like profile. So you could be really like, I don't know, really mathematical, really intellectual, but you might have really bad executive functioning, which is like being able to do day-to-day tasks, like look after yourself and cook for yourself and things like that. So, but one of the common traits for like autistic women, and if you've seen the two quite good documentaries out recently, I think it mentions it there, is that they find it hard to self-advocate. And I think it has something to do with the fact that you're like very capable in some ways, but then you're almost like quite naive, and you never really learn social nuances and how to navigate things. And almost like you're quite like trusting or gullible or vulnerable, I don't know. But I almost felt like I needed lessons in like, I don't know, the unsaid social things.
Yeah.
It's really, sorry, I'm not using my words very well. It's really hard to describe, but sometimes I just couldn't understand why people said things and did things, and even like why people lied and things like that. I didn't. So I would take everything as, because I would never lie, and therefore I just thought, if you're an expert, you're an expert, you're right. If somebody says something, they wouldn't lie. And I obviously realize now that that's not true, but it's taken me like a long time to understand that. And also it's taken me to understand my own difference to understand that, okay,
Yeah.
I'm different from everyone else and not everyone else thinks like me. Which is why I think it is important to recognize neurodivergence and neurodiversity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's why I didn't question it. And also it spoke to my like internal narrative that I was always driven because I never felt good enough. And I think there's a lot of people that feel that, but
Yeah.
you know, I grew up kind of in a difficult environment, and like my bottom line was, right, you're not good enough. And therefore, as much as like proving that wrong really spurred me on, as soon as something kind of like agreed with it, it was such a quick decline, and it was like, well, that makes sense. Like, so I think those two combination.
So could you take pleasure from the fact that you had fought your way back into the team, or was even that difficult?
I think that was difficult because like even then people didn't see what I'd gone through. Like all they saw was Caragh used to be good, and now she's just a bit rubbish. And they didn't see how hard I was trying behind the scenes. Like even to be just a bit rubbish, I was having to get everything right because I was poisoning myself every day, basically. Then also you add to that the fact that you're in the coach's black book and they're never going to give you a chance. So you're just like fighting everything. It felt like a constant fight. And there were times when, like, I remember when there's a lot of times that I felt really misunderstood because, like I said, I was doing everything I could, and like, say I was like blunt to a teammate, which has happened, and I'd get pulled in. It was almost like there was looking for any excuse to get rid of me, and I think I got pulled into like almost like a panel, and got told like that. I mentioned it earlier, but like, oh, you know, you've got a personality problem, and you're a bully, da da da. I remember just my internal narrative at the time was like, I'm doing everything I can. Like, I'm your most dedicated athlete. Like, I'm fighting for this. Like, and I snapped at someone because they were taking the piss, basically. And like, I'm so tired all the time. And it just felt like I just wanted someone to give me a break. And I remember I sort of started tearing up in that meeting. And then when I got out, I just ran to the changing rooms in floods of tears.
Oh, wow.
And I think that was like, because I was talking to my husband about this the other day. He was like, I remember that was like the time that you were like so close to stopping, because it felt like everything was against me. I was like, I can't fight anymore. So yeah, I was not proud of where I was, because like I knew what it's like to be really good. I'd been really good, and I was so far from that. I was like, it just felt wrong, and I didn't know why. It just in this constant fight. It just felt like a big wall in front of me, and I didn't know how to overcome it. And it was about finding that, like, the wall is now turning into a jumper. Okay, this analogy. It was about finding that like one bit to pull, and then it would all come unravel. But I couldn't find it. And so, actually, sorry, no, you go.
So I guess the question is what changed, and I know part of the answer is there was a new performance director, Brendan Purcell. Was that the main reason that things took a different path?
Yeah, and like Brendan has obviously been like thrown under the bus recently for Tokyo. And I really don't think I've been speaking to people from other sports about this, and they're like, yeah, so when you bring in a new performance director or something, you give them about 4 to 6 years to make change. If they're really trying to change culture, you give them 4 to 6 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, so they gave them like 2 years plus COVID, just before the Olympics, that was also delayed. And I don't know.
Yeah.
But I guess it's all about like money, isn't it? And budgets and medals. But yeah, like as much as people criticize him, he was very good for me and for a few other people. Like he had a very person-centered approach, and when he kind of had his introductory meeting, I believed him. Like when he spoke, I believed him when he said he was person-centered, and it meant that when I reached like what I felt like was the end of the road at the national indoors in the end of 2018, so December, I was like, I think I'll arrange a meeting with him and with a female like one of the only female coaches in the building, who I also trusted, outside of Caversham, and also with my husband. And I basically laid all my cards on the table. I was like, this is how it is. This is supposed, like, I'm on all this medication. It's supposed to be making me better. And it's supposed to be helping, and I don't think it is. And I can't hold it together anymore. I've tried everything. I've got all the 1%ers nailed. I'm doing everything I can. And I've tried to get over this wall every which way, and I can't. And he said, like, I'm going to help you. Oh
wow.
And okay, that's actually made me really feel really teary. Because he was like the first person.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, that's amazing.
He was like the first person in like that whole time.
Yeah.
To like say, I'm gonna like look at you as a person in the context, and I'm gonna help you. And so it was really like lucky for me that tissue in my pocket. It's like I do this a lot. It was really lucky for me, like a real strange coincidence, that they had just introduced the UK Sport Mental Health Panel at the time.
Yes.
So they're like the 3 of the best psychiatrists, sports psychiatrists, psychologists in the country. And he referred me to them. So I was their first client.
Really?
I like to say client rather than patient.
Yeah.
And so they came to my house. They like looked at my medical notes, which were about this thick. They like spoke to people, like obviously spoke to me. And quite early on, they were like, we don't think you have bipolar. Actually, we think a better diagnosis would be high functioning autism. And actually my reaction was a bit like, this is gonna be really bad. I was a bit like, gross. Like, I don't want to be autistic. Like, but doesn't that show the stigma that's attached to it?
Yes.
Like, I was like, oh great, from one stigmatized thing to another. Like, this is just gonna have a whole other heap of things I'm gonna have to explain to people and see their faces drop and like but I worked with an incredible lady called Anne-Marie Davis. So she was on the panel, and she was also my therapist, and she gave me like trauma therapy for some of the time at Rome, but also for like childhood stuff. And then we titrated off the medication over, it took like 8 to 10 months, I think.
Wow, that long.
Obviously, yeah, but it's like, it was a lot by the end. And then also created a communication plan that I shared with the coaches. So it was like try not to ask me open-ended questions about my feelings. Unless you've got all day. to wait for an answer that's actually relevant. Check that I got the right message from a briefing, and try and make sure there's bland food on training camps for when I just get tired and like
yeah.
don't want to deal with all the flavors and stuff. But ultimately, at the indoors in December 2018, I had done like a 6:59 or something terrible.
Yeah.
And then by 2020 or 2021, I think by 2020 I was like 6:46, and then 2021 I did like a 6:42. So I got 17 seconds faster.
Yeah.
And I went from like spare in 2019 to like one of the consistently like top performing bowsiders in 2021.
Because you were in the 4 at one World Cup, weren't you?
Yeah, I didn't get seat race for that boat. I got put into the 8 straight off. This is also a touchy subject, but there were a couple of us that just got put into the 8, and there was a lot said about, oh, we're going to make this boat stronger, so then you don't say anything, and then until the appeals window is closed, and then there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
But I think because I had this label of autism, you know, I'm also unreliable because of what I've been through in the past. Because I had all the ups and downs, like regardless of the context, it was seen as almost like don't want to risk it. But obviously the fact that I was then put in as the next best choice in the 4 kind of shows that actually that's where they saw me, as one of the top performers. But it got a silver medal, and that was like literally just jumped in it a few days before. And I actually feel really grateful that I got that opportunity, because I genuinely think if I hadn't, I would have been used as a scapegoat for the poor performance in Tokyo, because I have a label of autism.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the 8 had a story which I know a little bit about, but not a lot. The women's 8, and clearly you finished in 7th place in the Olympics, and you didn't have the speed that you wanted to do. You changed coaches quite late on towards the Olympics. What can you say about the story of the 8?
I think fundamentally there were two major issues. One was that the squad was ring fenced because of COVID. So there was no one coming up through. So it was basically, if you were there, you were in almost. And then the second one was because of the hierarchy that had been in place in the years preceding. It meant that certain people had never been challenged before.
Yes.
And so when they were then put in situations that were perceived to be unfair, it was like they'd had the rug pulled out from under them. And I don't think that they knew necessarily how to cope or thrive in that situation. And so you had a lot of people who were mentally in a really bad place. And I don't necessarily think that's their fault, because like that's a management thing. I think, and Brendan wasn't really responsible for selecting that 8.
Oh, really?
No. So, but that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah. And you changed coaches, or your coach dropped out on training camp in Varese, I believe.
Yes, but again, I think that was a wrong decision way earlier on.
Okay.
So that was a coach that was not suited, didn't have any experience coaching eights or like large groups of people,
Mm.
and had been coaching the four.
Yeah.
And actually, like, I think that it would have been better if it stayed that way.
Yeah. So obviously, you know, you're now an Olympian, and you know, being selected to represent Britain in the Olympics is an incredible feat. It's kind of goes in part with, you know, where you finished to an extent. So how do you look back on the Olympics and your Olympic experience?
What I got from it was is really sad, but it wasn't a great experience because I wasn't there for like the t-shirt. So
Yeah. Okay.
like I'd had a lot projects that I was more proud of, and like better racers and in the past. And I guess the thing that frustrated me the most was the management of it all, and the decisions that were being made, and the way that people were made to feel, the athletes and things. So it was actually quite a frustrating experience.
Oh wow.
Like the writing was on the wall the whole time.
Yeah.
And I actually felt a bit like a lamb to the slaughter. But luckily for me, I'd been through so much that I was like, I knew how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I feel like I was actually very proud of the way that I conducted myself, and kind of did some sort of mental gymnastics to be in the right place. But it doesn't stop the fact that logically,
Yeah.
I can see the situation clearly. But I think what it did give, which I didn't expect at all. Oh my God. Sorry, my phone's going all over the place. What I think it did give me that I didn't expect was, so there was, I should say this. I'm just going to say this because I've said everything else now. In the lead up to the Olympics, I pretty much, I said to a few people in charge, like, we shouldn't send this 8. Like, because they were tossing it up in the air as to whether they seat race people from the outside.
Yeah.
Like, and make it a fully development boat.
Yeah.
And I was like, please do that. Like, I don't mind if because they're like, well, that means you'll get seat race. And I was like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I would rather be the spare to the fastest boat than just have my bum on a seat.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I don't know why they just proceeded with it. Because we were sent, we didn't hit the times that we needed to hit, and we were sent under the sort of development umbrella.
Yeah.
But we didn't have development people in the boat. So I was like, I don't understand. Like, if you're going to send this boat under, sorry, this is my autism being really like blunt about all of this,
Yeah.
if you're going to send it under the development umbrella, send development athletes. And some of the athletes that could have gone to that in that boat if they had made the right decision, got medals in pairs at the World Cup before the Olympics.
Inverossi,
So I'm like, you could have had, or maybe I would have got secret raced out of it. Who knows? But you could have had a much better boat, and I just don't understand what they were thinking. Like, I have no idea. And that's what I say when I that's what I mean when I said it felt like we were lambs to the slaughter. But yeah, what I was saying was what it did give me is the label of an Olympian. Whether I feel like I've almost not earned it or whatever, like I do feel like I cheat a bit sometimes. It's given me the 3 letters that means I can open a lot of doors and I can have a lot of influence. I can make a positive difference with neurodiverse sport. And so like I feel like I've been given a privilege that I absolutely have to use.
Just an aside, a personal aside there. I mean, I won Olympic gold back in '84, and for a long time I felt like, it wasn't, I'm not sure if I deserved it, in the sense of I kind of thought I was a bit of a second-class Olympian, which was basically utter rubbish.
You want gold?
I know it took me a lot. Yeah, but I'm just saying, in the context of you and everything you've described when we're chatting, I mean that is the sum total of everything, and it was an amazing achievement to be selected, even though the boat wasn't the speed you wanted it to be. How soon after the Olympics did you know you were going to found Neurodiverse Sport?
I was job hunting for ages. I carried on for a bit. I swapped because my hip was bad and my back was bad. I swapped sides.
Oh, really? Oh, so you carried on into 22?
Yeah, I actually came second at trials on stroke side after a few weeks on stroke side. Crazy. But ultimately, I felt like I'd had the rug pulled under me again with a new head coach coming in. It felt like I'd sort of got this understanding, finally, dragged people to understand me from left, right, and centre. And then you've got a whole new person come in who's trying to stamp their kind of mark on things. And I mean, my experience was not, he's a nice person, but I was like, I can't start from scratch again. Like I can't do it. So in short, I also got sent to the psychologist about my hip, but we'll just forget that. Like I was a bit like, okay, right, nothing is actually going to change unless it's changed like on a greater scale. Like I'm going to keep coming up against these problems where people don't understand me and how I work best, and my neurodiversity, unless people are educated generally and there's a culture shift and an understanding shift. And I think it will only help all athletes as well, because if you understand people who are neurodivergent, if you understand neurodiversity, you understand how to get the best out of everyone, regardless of the way they think, regardless of their differences. So I think it will solve a multitude of problems. So but when I stopped, I was job hunting for ages.
Right.
And I wanted to, but I didn't have any like qualifications in the last like 10 years or so, because I'd just been in a hellhole and not had any energy to put into anything else. And then I was kind of like, I really want to sort of help in this area, but there was no one doing anything about it. So I thought, like, I knew I wanted to go into the charity sector, or the kind of like not-for-profit sector. But yeah, it was only when I told my story to a few people, because that was the only way that I was going to get, that was the only way people were going to understand why I had this giant gap.
Yeah.
In my CV. So that was the only reason that I was telling my story to people. But then the reactions that I got were like, wow, that's really powerful. You should do something with that. And I was like, like, I don't think I can, I don't want it to be about me.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's like, right now it's so about me, and it's like quite uncomfortable. Sometimes,
Yes.
sometimes I like literally lay in bed and I'm like, what have I done?
Yeah. Okay. I get that.
But yes, I think once I get an idea, generally, like if I decide to do something, it will happen. And so I decided I was going to do it in like August, September, and I kind of said to myself, I'll just let it grow naturally. And then November, I really started, and then since then, it's like taken over my life. But at the same time, like I can see the difference it's making. Like already, like I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, but Bupa are funding neurodiversity assessments for athletes now.
Really, that's fantastic.
Not ongoing care, but that's the first step. I've got 4 Olympic teams that want education sessions on neurodiversity. I've got a non-Olympic professional team that wants it. Like there's people everywhere wanting to learn, like sports teams, and that's incredible. There's like the athlete blog is growing more and more. And that's great because that provides role models, representation, a sense of community, like all these things that I think would have been really helpful for me to see. So yeah.
So I mean, all that sounds incredible. I guess partly because I've heard you say this in some of your interviews, that and I think you've proved it through, you know, your resilience through, you know, utter hell, really. That neurodiverse or neurodivergent athletes can have a superpower, which gives them more focus, more staying power than others. And if they're in the right environment, that can be of enormous benefit to a team. I mean, have I said that correctly?
Yeah, 100%. Like, if you think, like, Michael Phelps has ADHD, Simone Biles has ADHD. Like, there's James Haskell came out as having ADHD recently. There's the Irish football player who came out as having autism, or being autistic, sorry. Like there's so, if you actually start digging, there are a lot of athletes who are neurodivergent. It's just very potluck. As an athlete, you have to be very lucky at the moment to make it, because generally you have to have a random coach who's really understanding, because it's not, the system isn't in place to be encouraging of diversity in sport. So that's why, and then like because of the stigma, generally athletes don't disclose. I mean, they're advised not to disclose by their agents and people. And so you only really see the real high performers, and then I think people kind of look at them and they kind of say, oh, that's the exception to the rule. The rest of them are, you know, the rest of the athletes with ADHD, they're just scatty and they're just like, you know, you can't trust them, and like the rest of the athletes with autism, they're just, you know, have no social skills, can't get through to them, whatever. Like, I think what I'm trying to do is bridge that gap between what you think, like the people that I just talked about, the negative stereotypes, and the real high performers, and show that there are people all the way in between. And actually, with the right environment, you could get many more high performers than you have right now.
Yeah. If I guess thinking about rowing now, it could be any sport, but if teammates of an athlete who might be neurodivergent are maybe experiencing issues, or a coach is kind of experiencing issues, what should they do?
I explore my website, watch the videos, read the blogs. You can always message me, or message the info email address. But I think if you're a coach, it's probably a bit different if the athletes are like quite young.
Yeah.
But if you're a coach, like, don't be afraid to ask questions and educate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as a neurodivergent athlete, I would much rather someone put their foot in it and say the wrong thing whilst they're just being curious and genuinely wanting to understand me,
mm-hmm.
than avoid a difficult conversation and ignore like the glaringly obvious, and actually like to the detriment of progress.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just like talking about it, normalizing it. I think I like to kind of learn from all of the conversations that I have with different athletes. Like, I'm always learning all the time, because, you know, my experience is unique, my brain is unique. It's not the same as any other any other neurodivergent athletes. One of the best bits of advice that I was given was from an athlete. I haven't put out his interview yet, but it will be coming up, called Ed Baxter. So he is a swimmer. He was on the Great Britain team, and he was Adam Peaty's teammate, and now he's his business partner. But he coaches like large cohorts of athletes. He also is autistic. So there's another one, just I'm pulling them out of the woodwork. But he's like such a successful business person now, and it was a really fast swimmer. But he coaches like loads of kids in the pool, and, you know, also some of them will be neurodivergent. And I said, like, what is your best tip for coaches who are coaching lots of people? Like, how are you supposed to, you know, be person-centered with every person? He's like, sometimes you can't. Like, yes, it is about having the conversation here and there, but he said, my biggest tip would be basically to shut down any discrimination. So if you see somebody expressing themselves, or, you know, maybe like looking a bit different, acting a bit different, but they're not hurting anyone. And if you see people pointing their fingers or sniggering or saying something, shut it down and like tell them why they're wrong, because that will speak 1,000 words to everybody around. And it will encourage that kind of atmosphere of, no, it's okay to be different, like, let's look out for each other, rather than ridiculing each other. And like I said with the earlier examples of how the coaches, their attitude towards myself but also other athletes would spread. Like, actually, if you've got a coach who's saying, that's not acceptable, we respect each other here, we try and enable each other, like, actually the athletes will start following, and then the athletes will start doing your job. The teammates will start helping those athletes that need help. Like, and actually everybody will take the load and everybody will help each other. So I think that for me is the best bit of advice, because it's the most practical.
It's Catherine
Oh,
Gibson who's watching.
oh, that's so cute.
Yeah.
And yeah, Martin, your questions have been very sensitive. I was a tiny bit worried. I was like, oh my God, is he going to grill me? But then Mikey, my husband, said, like, he was like, oh no, I think he's really good. I've like listened to some of it before, and he's like very. He just said, it didn't say sensitive, but he said something along the lines
Yeah.
of, I can't remember the word. My brain's gone. I've done too much talking today.
No,
I'm losing my words. Not just this, but earlier today.
I was slightly nervous beforehand, actually.
You were?
Yeah, just heightened awareness. Just that it was important stuff that we were going to talk about. So, yeah.
Yeah, but then, like I said, as long as you're coming from the right place, no question is a bad question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it. I don't know. I think if somebody jumps down your throat, that's their problem. In my opinion. But
yeah.
Also, your sister messaged me.
Oh.
She messaged me privately on. I couldn't, for some reason, I couldn't reply to it to say thank you. But she messaged me privately on my website. I was like, oh, that's so cute.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, Caragh, and it may not be something that you do. Maybe until later in your life or something. So when you look back on your time in rowing, what comes to mind? I mean, you mentioned you had, a brilliant start to your career with, the medals in the pair, the four, and the under 23 medals. And then, successfully getting into the team, battling against horrendous odds, being selected for the Olympics. I mean, that's kind of me looking at it. But how do you look at it?
I think I have really, really fond memories of my original rowing club, and that community. Honestly, it was amazing. Southampton
Colporters, yeah.
Such a great club, such great people. Coastal rowing is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I have had some, there were sort of like little group pockets of us who were like always at the bottom of the pyramid, in the team.
Yeah.
That when you're like kind of fighting against adversity, but you're alongside someone else who's fighting against adversity, you kind of, even though it's a bad experience, it kind of bonds you. So I've got some friends who've gone through that with me, and I've got fond memories of that. Like when you literally on your knees and you're like, it's almost laughable at points. So I do have some fond memories when you're like, this is so. Yeah. Actually, even through the bad stuff, there's been sort of some weird black humor to it. And then I think this sounds so cheesy, and I've said it before, but I think I want to get to the point in 5 years' time where someone says, if you could, would you turn back time and do it the same to get this, to have this effect? So I want to get to that point. And to be honest, it might not even, I say 5 years, but even already I'm like, wow, maybe I would do it all again to raise awareness like this, because the messages I get are incredible. Each one, it fills my heart with joy. Because I felt so alone and so wrong and so different and so inadequate for so long. I felt like I was the only one. And now I get people, writing me emails, writing me Instagram messages just saying like, thank you so much for doing this. This is my story. Thank you so much for doing this. Is my story.
Wow.
I resonate with you so much. Like,
Yeah.
and it just makes up for everything, really.
Yeah.
Honestly, like,
Yeah.
it's fantastic. So yeah, it's turning some quite dark memories into something purposeful and beautiful, because without that I couldn't have this.
Yeah. That's amazing. Caragh, we're going to end the live part of this interview here. I think we've been chatting for 70 minutes. I sense we could go on for more in terms of, you know, neurodiverse sport, but you know, I'd recommend anyone to go and visit Caragh's company's website, Neurodiverse Sport, or look up Caragh. It's been an incredible chat, Caragh. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.